And we're live! Yay! Hi, everyone, and welcome to this event for The Year I Stopped Trying with Katie Heaney, the wonderful author of this book, and Jaya Saxena. I'm Carter. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the event coordinator here at Astoria Bookshop, the bookshop hosting this event. If you don't know who we are because you maybe found us through the magic of the internet, we are a bookshop in Astoria, Queens. And if you see that button right down there at the bottom, you can actually buy a copy of Katie's book signed by Katie. So before the end of the event, or you can do it right now and have it over on the side, or whenever you feel like it, be sure to order a copy. So before we get started, I just want to go through just a couple of housekeeping things. You will have the opportunity to ask questions during the last 10 minutes of this. If you have questions, put them in the Ask a Question function right down over there about at the bottom. And you can chat with one another over on the chat on the right. I know some of you have found that chat box over there already, but you're welcome to chat with each other and talk about the book, talk about how great Katie is, whatever you need to. But we will kick you out if you participate in any trolling or any racial, ethnic, or homophobic slurs. Basically, we're asking you to be respectful. Finally, just one more reminder of this. There is a button right down there at the bottom to buy a signed copy of this book. So let's get things kicked off and introduce our wonderful guests tonight. Katie Heaney, who uses she, her pronouns, is the author of the memoirs Never Have I Ever and Would You Rather, and the novels Dear Emma and Public Relations. She is a senior health writer at The Cut, and you can find her on Twitter at KT, the letters, Heaney. Jaya Saxena, she, her pronouns, is a writer living in Queens. She is currently a staff writer at eater.com, and her latest book is Crystal Clear, which also is available at our bookshop and also can be signed by Jaya. So just specify that you would like that. Anyway, I will let these two take it away and start talking about this book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. Oh my God. Thank you everybody for joining us. This is so fun. And thank you, Katie, for writing this book, which is about a teenager finding herself, and which I, as a just turned 35-year-old, was sobbing at multiple points. So I feel like a lot of people have had this reaction to this book if they've read it already. Yeah, it starts with such a simple idea of Mary, our protagonist, who is a very type A, good girl, good student, forgetting to turn in her homework one day, or not having her homework, and then kicking off this idea, well, what if I just didn't? What if I didn't do homework? What if I did the bare minimum of all of my commitments and see what would change? And again, to me, this felt like still such a terrifying idea sometimes. Yeah. So I want to know, what is your relationship to the concept of being in trouble?
I mean, how long do we have? That is something that I am still afraid of very much to this day. Mary is aspirational for me in that regard. She's braver certainly than I was at that age, and probably than I still am. And it's something I talk about in therapy at least twice a month. So, yeah, I think just I sometimes say oh, it's being raised Catholic, but I don't know how much true that, it's, people believe that because everyone knows that's a thing with Catholics, but we weren't super religious. So I don't know how much I realistically absorbed from that versus just somewhere I got it in my head that if I didn't do things a certain way, I would get in trouble. And I'm the eldest child, and I just wanted to be, to do everything right. And even for things that I don't know that there is a right way. I think it's taken me a long time to break out of that sort of black and white way of looking at things.
Yeah. No, same, completely. And I like that you mentioned that there are these influences that could be easy to peg as like, oh yeah, it was Catholicism, but like not really. Because I feel like this is a book, and some of this is a coming out story, but also just the story of this girl figuring out so much. But without a lot of very hard external barriers. Like there's the Catholic Church, there's sort of America's general homophobia or pressures that are put on teenage girls. But there's no character that's there like telling Mary that she's wrong. You know, there's no figure that's standing there being like, I'm going to punish you if you don't do this. It seems like a largely accepting and chill community that she's in. So I'm curious if you can talk about the choice to write like that kind of coming out story where it's not like you're fighting against all odds, but you're really just fighting against your own brain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I do share in common with Mary is like, I think my biggest obstacle was like myself and my own ideas about who I was or who I was supposed to be. And like, I really still couldn't really tell you what it was. Nobody's fault. Like there's nobody I can blame singularly for not coming out until later or whatever. Just like, I don't think that there's anyone that's necessarily holding her back. It's a very very internal set of judgments that she's working with. But that doesn't make them any less painful or sort of stifling. And so I just was, interested in the idea that like, okay, no one's really holding her back per se, but that doesn't mean that she can allow herself to move forward or to develop in a way that makes her really happy versus a way that just makes other people happy. And it's not even clear that it does make other people happy. It's just like her idea of what she imagines should make other people happy because it's, all the like sort of prescriptive norms that young girls in particular should fulfill. So yeah, I mean, I do like, I'm glad that if that succeeded for you as far as like, I don't like, I'm not under any illusions that like that this character has like a particularly hard life. It's just like teenage anguish. And I think that everyone goes through that. And even if a lot of what's wrong with her is in her own head, like that's still very real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there, so many of the narratives and like queer narratives that we get are so much like you're up against something very specific. You're up against parents who are going to disown you, or a religion that isn't going to accept you, or something like that. And I just love that this was a story about somebody who that wasn't necessarily her fight, because I do think that for a lot of people that is the case. And then there starts being a guilt of like, well, wait a minute, like if nobody's telling me not to, why is this still so hard for me to figure out?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't really been interested in writing like traumatic gay or coming out stories. I think there's like more than enough of those probably. And it just isn't something that I can write authentically at least at this point. Like it wasn't my experience. And I think there's a lot of ways for it to be painful and emotional and life-changing and still not have that sort of like villain character. And yeah, like you said, I mean, it can almost feel bad in a way to not have had that external reason to prevent you from coming out, because then you're like, well, then what was the problem? But I think I wanted to speak to how hard it is to understand yourself, even when things are set up in somewhat in your favor. Like it's not easy, just because you don't have like, homophobic parents that are going to throw you out.
Well, even though I said all that, I feel like we should also talk about Catholicism because it is like an underlying current in this book.
Sure. Yeah.
But again, in a way where it's like there's not like a priest being like, you're a sinner, Mary, like you're a bad person. But it is just, it's clearly there. It's clearly informing the world that Mary lives in. So yeah, I would love to hear more about like how her Catholic upbringing maybe influences her story and maybe her mindset in this book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, there's like the obvious, I mean, I think to me, for her, it's not even as much about like the Catholicism or the Catholic Church being anti-gay so much as being really rigid and, you know, having a strict definition of what's right and wrong and what makes a good person. And a lot of it is informed by like her youth group. And I think this is, again, something that I can relate to, but like it's almost like the girl in her youth group who's, you know, the popular one or whatever, like she tries to figure out who she should be based on that girl, and because that girl is like, you know, a good Catholic, like that's what she works off of. Or if she's at school, then she works off of who's popular and well liked there. So it's more about like the figures within those forces that influence her, because she just wants to be normal in whatever environment she's in. And so with Catholicism, it, you know, that looks a little bit more conservative or pure in some way, and it's attractive. I think that there's like something very appealing in having a rule book to follow and knowing what to do to be a good person. Like that appeals to me. You know, there's a lot of times when I like tell my therapist or whoever, like, I just want someone to tell me what to do. And like, it's not totally true, because then if someone tells me what to do, I also don't want to do it. but like the idea of having that person who's the authority or who knows best is very appealing. And so that's something that I think that she likes about the church and is, you know, maybe more hesitant to move away from, but then doesn't necessarily relate to how her peers seem to experience their faith or the church.
Yeah, no, and I feel like that brings up like truly one of my favorite scenes is she's at her confirmation camp and everybody is around her and having this like moment of prayer, and she's sort of looking around like, wait a second, like does everybody actually believe this, or like are you all just faking this in order to like be part of the group and fitting in? And I feel like that actually was such like a wonderful and unexpected parallel to like sort of a queer experience of just being like, wait, you're all serious about this? Like I thought we were all just saying because this is what everyone else was saying, but like you mean that? And like,
yeah. I mean, I think that's true. It's, I mean, I don't know if I was aware of that at the time, but it is definitely similar, a similar feeling of being an outsider and just not like, you can never, like the fact that you can't get in anyone else's brain drives me insane. Like I really wish that I could just like spend a little bit of time in other people's brains to feel like I can understand what the way they think of things, because sometimes it's so foreign that it just like doesn't seem possible. And, you know, I remember maybe not with confirmation necessarily, but certainly when I was younger, like the way that people would talk about their faith was confusing to me, or like just people would seem so sure of themselves, whether it was faith or whatever else, that I just like couldn't relate and couldn't understand how I could never figure out if they were telling the truth and they really believed it, or sort of like fake it till you make it. And I think now, being older, it was probably a lot more of the latter. But at the time, it really felt like I was the one freak who didn't think of things the same way. And like, you know, with dating too, I felt like, oh, I'm the only one who struggles with this, and whom it doesn't come naturally to. And that wasn't true either, but like it feels that way at the time. And it's only when you're an adult usually that you can figure it out. So I think with Mary, she's able to have some of those realizations much sooner than I did.
Yeah. No, but I do feel like that's such a teenage feeling of not just sort of not knowing what you're doing or being really confused, but being utterly convinced that every other 14-year-old has everything figured out, and that like you are the only one who doesn't.
And to be fair, like some of them did. I'm not gonna like take that back completely. Like there were people who really had it together at that age already somehow, and I don't know how. There were like I feel like I would get teased like in college or later, but when like referring to like popular kids as if that like wasn't a real concept, and it's like I don't relate to people who don't categorize people in that way. Like that was just how it was. Like if you can't see that certain people are doing better socially than others, I don't know what planet you're living on. So some people really are cooler and do have it figured out, and I wasn't one of them, but I don't think that I was as alone as I maybe felt either.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I feel like there's just a lot of themes in here about sort of like self-denial and like duty and obligation versus desire or like exploration. And I feel like these are things that like as a country and society we seem to be constantly grappling with, because it's like I feel like everybody's either denying ourselves everything in order to like seemingly live like a virtuous or like moral life, or like forsaking every single obligation and then calling it self-care,
Yes.
and being like, yeah, I'm gonna bail on like all of my friends every night, and that's self-care, and like you can't judge me for it.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, why do you think it is so hard to find that balance? I
don't know. I mean, talk about another thing that comes up in therapy a lot for me, but no, it's okay. I think that I really react strongly to the sort of like counter movement towards quote unquote self-care that you bring up, when it's sort of like there's a lot of like infographics on Instagram or whatever where it's like it's like feminist to say no, or like say like it's empower, like you should like, or the way that people talk about friendships as if they're these sort of like mercenary exchanges where you have to set boundaries and about when they can talk to you and about what, and it's just like this very non-human experience that I don't recognize. And I think some of that is just a reaction to being pushed too far in the other direction before that, where we're supposed to do everything. And so it's like, I think we I want to say as a country, but probably just as a human race, have a hard time with like moderation. And I definitely, I mean, I asked one of my friends who's here, but like I asked her like a couple weeks ago, like, is it okay, like if I am mostly a person who wants to hang out in like smaller groups, and if I stay home like more nights a week than not? And she was like, yeah, but like I felt like I needed that permission. And I decided that she was the authority on it that day, but like I don't know why I can't just be okay with that myself, because but I think, I mean, I kind of know the reason, and it's because of social media and comparing ourselves to other people and seeing other people who have really social lives, or beautiful wardrobes, or whatever it is that you can compare yourself to, and it's really hard to escape. And self-help books, I think, are like the one permanently succeeding book genre for a reason, because we all want someone to give us the answers. And even though I know intellectually that there really aren't any, it's really hard to remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, which I also feel like brings up an interesting point, because I feel like in the book, and correct me if I'm misremembering this, like there's texting going on, and there's like calls going on, but you did not delve really into any social media. And so like, was that a choice of like timing when you wanted to set the book, or was that just like writing Twitter seems impossible?
Yeah.
Or just
probably a
uninteresting.
combination.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, probably mostly that it's uninteresting to me. There are people who can write about social media well. I don't know if I'm one of them. I guess I haven't tried super hard yet, but it's challenging. I hate when like if I'm reading a book and I get taken into someone else's like Instagram journey, that can kind of take me out of it. And I wanted to, it's a relatively short book. I wanted to keep it pretty internal and like moving along. And I thought social media might slow it down. And I also, this is like more of a smaller reason, but like I feel like I've been a little burned by it before. I mentioned Vine in public relations, and then it like went out of business like, a couple months later. So it's like, and it's fine. It's like now it's TikTok, but like it is an ephemeral sort of industry, and I sort of wanted this to feel like it could be a little bit more timeless. So yeah, it was probably a combination of those factors.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I feel like there was some story recently where like that app Yik Yak was coming back that was around for like a year, and now I'm just like, oh God, was there any book that had Yik Yak in it? Because then that immediately dates it.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, I feel like, Twitter and Instagram are probably safe to incorporate at this point, but I don't know how to do it, or don't know if I want to do it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned how much, that there are similarities between stuff that you've experienced and stuff that Mary experiences, or sometimes your mindsets. And then you have this character of Elise, who is, one of Mary's coworkers, and she's, seems impossibly cool and fun to hang out with, and is openly queer as a teen, and seemingly like really self-assured and comfortable in that identity. I'm curious how you went about writing her, if that felt, I don't know, just like who maybe you looked at to influence that character, or what you were thinking when you were creating her.
Yeah. A lot of my like friend characters are often like pull things from my real friends or people that I know. One person that Elise is semi based off of, who's straight, but whatever, is my first college roommate. And yeah, I just think like it was more like her sense of humor and her self-assuredness. And then there will be like little pieces from other places. And then part of it is just imagining what it would have done for someone like me or someone like Mary to have met someone like that at that age, which I certainly never did. And how much difference I think that could have made. And I just wanted her to feel like, so I really wanted in this book to write a lot about the job, because I was reading a lot of books about like menial labor and part-time jobs, and like I just really enjoy a novel about a job. So I was also like, God, her job really sucks. Like I want to give her like a fun coworker. And so, because again, that was not necessarily my experience working retail. I found it hard to make friends at my retail jobs. So I wanted to give her someone that was like fun to be around, and it kind of just evolved from there. But yeah, I think that I often am pulling, especially for characters I like, certainly I'm basing them a lot of times off of friends of mine from the past.
Yeah. No, and I feel like I actually I loved how much like she was at the job and how much that was part of the narrative, because I feel like there can be so many there can be so many YA books set in, you know, nominally like realistic worlds where they're sort of just like off and doing all these things, and I'm just like, my teenage years were a lot of like going to school and then going home, and that was sort of,
and or going to work, like,
or going to work, and it's just like there's
yeah.
not really, I was not living this life of adventure and massive socializing. It was like 3 points where
right, it's like a very like small circuit, and yeah, I mean, I worked part-time jobs in high school and college, and it just like it takes up a lot of your time. It's where a lot of your social life is. It's sort of like another place where you're being told what to do, particularly in a minimum wage job that is just so demeaning and demoralizing. And at the same time, when you're a kid especially, that's the only type of job you can get. And like you, or at least I felt like I had to listen to my stupid bosses because they were the bosses and they were grown men and I was a kid. But like that didn't mean really that I don't know. It just like they weren't like inherently better than me. And it's hard to understand that when you're a kid and you're like, I'm a part-time associate at whatever restaurant making $7 an hour. I have to listen to this guy or I'll get fired. And it's like, well, yeah, but so what? Like, especially if you're in the fortunate position where you're a kid and it's like, you could probably just find another part-time job. But I felt so, it was just another environment for me. And I think obviously for Mary, where it's like another place to potentially screw up or not live up to somebody's expectations. And that's just kind of one of the more bummer parts of being a teen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, completely. Well, you know, because you've done so many types of writing. You know, you do nonfiction and journalism, you've written adult fiction, you've written memoir. I'm curious both what made you interested in writing YA and maybe what you feel you can do with the YA genre that you can't do with other genres.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I mean, the reason I've done so many different kinds is because I do find it hard to stick with one, and I just like to follow where my interests go. Like I never want to write a book just because it's the like logical next step. And I think a lot of times I will try and force ideas in between books, and that never works out, but I never learn. And I like have to wait for something that I'm actually excited about. And this time with Girl Crushed, it just happened to be a YA story. And I had been told before, and this is like sort of a backhanded compliment, maybe, depending on how you want to receive it. Like I'd been told before that I have like a good, like young, like teenage voice, which is like, nice, but it's also like, oh, I'm 35. So like maybe eventually I will want to write more books for adults too. But I think that it's a good thing. And I think that what that means is that I can speak to something that like we all still can find within ourselves, like that sort of young, insecure, anxious person that's within us from when we were in middle school or high school. And I mean, I take it as a compliment. And I think I wanted to, it's hard to say anything that I wanted to do for YA without insulting YA, because like it's such a massive category. And I certainly have not read all of YA, but I also think that like sometimes what I have read is more maybe like earnest than my tone tends to be. And so I was sort of like, I want to read like with Girl Crush, like I want to read like a gay rom-com, but it's like funny and there's like nothing bad really happens, like, and with this one, it was like, again, I want it to be sort of like dark humor, and maybe something that feels like an adult sensibility, but with a teenage protagonist. And so I don't know if it's so much about like transforming the genre or anything like that. Just like, this is the story that I think I'm capable of telling well, and what my style permits me to do. And if that's something that's people feel is like different, then that's cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with the year I stopped trying specifically, because it really is such like a concise, clear sort of like thesis of what is going on in this book, and watching Mary's journey. Is that something that you had been sitting with for a while, or did it just come to you one day, this idea of, well, screw it, I'm not gonna do anything? Like, I don't know, I guess, how did you sort of develop this story, and how did it come to you?
Yeah, I mean, I hardly remember, and I always wish that I like wrote down more. I think I have something in my journal where it was like, I think I maybe have like sort of an idea. And I don't know how it arrives. If I knew that, I would be like knocking at that door constantly. But I think that at the time I was definitely feeling very existential myself, and just feeling like, what is the point of any of this? And, I think that the homework arena was sort of an easy analogy for me, as far as like this sort of perpetual fulfillment of assignments that in a way made me feel like I always had a purpose, because it was like, there's always more homework to do, and then you get it done, and then you get more. And like, sometimes I catch myself like missing those sorts of tasks, because it's like, well, when I don't have that next goal in mind of even like graduating from high school, graduating from college, then I went to graduate school just to have something else to graduate from. And it's like, once you run out of those, what else is there? So in a sense, I miss it, but it just made me think about how like I thought I'd be like put to death if I didn't turn in something. And I don't know why, like it wouldn't have mattered. It's like, I think this became most clear to me in my study abroad experience, where I realized like literally nobody else in my program went to their classes in Madrid. And I thought that we really did have to go to all the classes, because our syllabus said you could only miss 3. And I took that very literally. And nobody else did. And they were all fine. And I'm still angry about it. But that's not the way the world works. So it's just sort of, yeah, it just came to me through thinking about my own frustrations with purpose and tasks and meaning and all those good things.
Yeah. As you say that, I realize I did the exact same thing. Of just being like, it was that like literally I went to Rome, and I'm like, and I'm gonna get straight A's and be a good student.
Yeah,
and it's like,
that's
literally
what you're supposed to do.
no one cares.
Yeah.
And I realize that's like still like a relatively like privileged position to like do that from, but I was just like, oh, I should have just wandered around more.
Yeah.
Not
it would have been
anything.
fine. Yeah.
I'm curious, yeah, because I think you're right that there can be a lot of YA that's very like, it can be very earnest, or at its worst can sometimes like talk down to the reader. I'm curious maybe what books you were reading, or anything you were reading when you wrote this, or what you had in mind that sort of influenced your writing style, and if there was anything.
I mean, so the things I was reading, I'm gonna not even remember one of the names. I'm gonna look it up, but I was reading, like I said, a lot of books about jobs. And so I read Convenience Store Woman, which is pretty much just what it says about like a woman who works at a convenience store. It gets a little crazy at the end, but like a lot of it is honestly just like her going to work, and I loved it. And then this is not one that I would recommend to the young adult audience, but Lightning Rods by Helen DeWitt is the other one, and it's incredibly bizarre. She also wrote The Last Samurai, but this is it's about this guy who gets an idea for sort of very bizarre anti-sexual harassment device that he thinks he can market to workplaces. And it's just wild. But yeah, he's sort of like a traveling salesman. And I know there was others, but yeah, I was just like, I remember asking on social media, like, please give me recommendations for people who are, it's just like people going to work. Because that was interesting to me at the time, just the idea of this like thing that we have to do forever, and is often pretty miserable, but like there's no way around it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that was probably the main category. I don't tend to read, like when I'm writing something, I don't think I tend to read a lot in the same exact genre because I don't want to unintentionally absorb anything or like be too influenced. So I wasn't reading a lot of YA during the writing process for this one.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you know, I feel like a lot of the conversation around YA, there's a lot of conversation around representation. And I think like having stories for every type of young person to really like see themselves in a book. And I don't know, what do you think it would have felt like for you to have read this book when you were Mary's age?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been big. I don't know, like the frustrating thing is like I'll never know if it would have like made a difference, if I would have seen myself in the character or in her coming out journey. I don't think I was aware of it, and I read so much when I was a kid that I don't really remember. My memory is also bad, so it's also very possible that I did read books with queer protagonists and I just don't remember. But mostly, you know, I think, you know, I read like all like 270 Gossip Girls or whatever there was. And I don't think at the time they had any queer characters. And yeah, I just don't, there were a couple YA books out there, like Annie on My Mind is like a classic. I'm not sure what year that came out, but like could have plausibly been something I read at the time, but I didn't come across it. And, you know, I think what was available when I was a teenager was, again, sort of the tragic coming out story, or where it's family turmoil and, you know, or the girl who's in love with a straight girl and nothing can happen and it's devastating or whatever. So I think that's another reason that I wanted to write a couple of YA books with relatively untraumatic coming out stories where they're just normal kids who like don't have to go to conversion camp or whatever it is. That it's just like, it can be hard, but it's like survivable, and they can be happy and well adjusted and still have a nice life, and have just the normal teenage range of problems. So yeah, I mean, I think even within representing certain categories, it's important that there's diversity and depth within those subgroups. Like there is not just one, you know, lesbian YA story to be told. Just there's not one Black YA story to be told. There's not, you know, there's so many like trans YA stories that have yet to be told. And sometimes I think the downfall of representation is that we like think that if the one that's first or early doesn't do it the right way, that is sort of some huge failure on that author's part. And I think it's like almost asking too much of people to represent their entire population. And it's like, well, there's an awful lot of young adult books about like young white straight girls who are all very different from each other. And like, there's no one right way to have done that. And I think the same should be true for marginalized groups as well. Like if we're really interested in equity and representation, then there should be a lot of them and they should be different from each other.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess too, just, and as I mentioned sort of at the beginning, everyone I feel like either that we know in common or anyone that I just see on Twitter who like has already read this book, uh, who is an adult, who's like, oh my God, this book really hit me. Like I can't believe like this is capturing so many of my feelings, whatever. Like, I think this is fantastic, but like, what do you make of the fact that so many adults are like deeply responding to this story?
Yeah, I mean, well, I like it because it's my book.
Yeah, well,
So I'm happy for anyone of any age to read it. And I think that, like, you know, on the one hand, I don't begrudge any adult who doesn't want to read YA. Like, you know, I don't, like I said, I don't read a ton of YA myself. Like, I think it's normal to want to read about people your own age. But I also appreciate those adults that have read this book, because I do think that there's a lot here that people can relate to no matter how old they are. And it's like I said, I mean, the homework thing is kind of like, it's not symbolic, like it really is about her homework, but like it sort of represents, I think, a lot of bigger themes too. And I think it ended up, you know, I started writing it before the pandemic, but it ended up being sort of weirdly well timed as far as the existentialism and dread and, you know, questions about work and how we spend our time that we're all experiencing right now. So I think that part of it is going to be especially relevant for adults, because I don't know any adult who's not thinking about those things a ton right now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it seems like the entire theme of this past year is like everyone just reassessing what we have thought we had to do, and wait a second, do I really have to do that, and how is that serving me, and is that what I really want? And then everyone's quitting their jobs, so it's like
yeah, I mean, it's just like, again, it was sort of a lucky accident in a way, but it just is, it's like something that we all go through, I think, in general, but maybe not all at the same time like we are right now. So in that sense, I'm grateful if it makes any, you know, adult feel that they can relate to something that is, you know, technically about a 16-year-old girl. But yeah, I think that there's a lot there that's just human regardless of her age.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see, we're almost at Q&A time.
Yeah, well then I will ask you about, I wanted to talk about, since we're partnering with the Storia Bookshop and I'm talking with you, I wanted to ask you to talk about the Rolling Library a little bit, because I've you know, sent a couple books to you guys, but I really love the organization and would love for the people who are here today to know more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Rolling Library is a project that was started here in Queens, and it's a mobile book fair. So we bring around free books to and events all around New York City. And our books come from donations. Either we'll have donation drives, or I believe you can, if you want to, yes, buy a copy of The Year I Stopped Trying, you can also buy a book to donate to the Rolling Library. And so, yeah, we pop up on the open streets and at different events. We also set up little free libraries at NYCHA houses around the city. I forget how many we have now, but I think it's more than 10, maybe more than a dozen. So it's been really great. And I think the whole goal is just making sure everybody has access to books, redistribute them to people who haven't always had that access, or can't always afford them. And then making sure that there are a lot of stories from authors of color, from other marginalized authors. So yeah, talking about that variety of representation, that it's not just like one book by a Black author or a trans author or a Latina author. It's many, many books, many, many stories. So everybody gets a chance to read, you know, a lot of things that can resonate with them in different ways. Because I feel like that's always the point where it's not, I mean, I read this book and I was just like, you know, Mary, get out of my head, and Katie, get out of my head. But, you know, it's never like you watch a story or like watch a show, read a book and think like, that's me 100%. Right. There are aspects of every character that you take and you're influenced by and you piece yourself together out of.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I just love that you guys are improving access, making it easier for people to just, and like by highlighting these books, I mean, like I said, I just didn't come across, but I mean, of course I play a role in that. I'm sure I was looking for books about like little white girls, but like, or little white straight girls, because that's who I thought I was at the time.
Whoops.
But I also just didn't, that's not what was highlighted by bookstore. I mean, like I went for what was put in the front shelves, and that was like normative stories. And so you guys highlighting books by underrepresented authors just makes it that much more likely that young people or whatever age people find something that speaks to them a little bit sooner than they might have otherwise.
Yeah. No, it's been really fun. And I think people react just so well to it. And yeah, it's been a really, really great initiative. Well, let me think about, I don't know. Was there any character in here or any part of it that you just had like a really fun time writing and were like, yeah, I nailed it?
I mean, yeah, like probably the bosses at La Baguette, again, may have drawn from personal experience there. I'll always remember some of the bosses that I had in retail or food service jobs. It's just, you just meet such personalities and, you know, for better and for worse. And it's like, you spend a fair amount of time around these people and they like rule over your life in such a weird way. And then you just never see them again. It's like, I just quit those jobs and it's like, they'll never think about me ever again, but I will think about them because of like just the impact they had on my young life. And I just love I love people who like rule over an entity like a Gap with like absolute tyranny. It's just like so funny to me. Like it's a Gap. It's not that serious, but like some of the most serious people I've ever met in my life have been my managers at retail mall jobs when I was a kid.
Oh my God, no, because it's just like that little bit of power that somebody gets that they just, and then you grow up and that you realize they were like 23. And
yes, yeah. They were also kids. They're also super underpaid. They're in a shitty circumstance, but like they are not going to let you forget that they are like ahead of you there. And it was, not a fun time. So it was nice to be able to write about those figures.
Yeah. I love that so much. And I also want to give a shout out to the therapist in this book who I found so delightful and so just friendly and like almost like a fairy godmother voice, like in a way that it wasn't magical, but just like a very sweet, understanding person. And yeah, I just sort of love that was like the world you built.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I never really I don't think I ever went to a guidance counselor in high school, but it was nice to just imagine like if someone like this had been there, that would have been great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yay.
All right. So let's get started on the Q&A. To everyone watching, you are welcome to still ask questions. We have 3 right now, but we might run through those fast. Who knows? And let's just get things started. with Paige's question here. What was your favorite YA novel when you were a teen? Why don't both of you answer this?
Well, definitely Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging. That series was and still is something that I think of as aspirational and like that. Talk about like really, really funny YA. Like that, those books are really, really funny, and I still think so. And sort of had this not totally likable main character in a way that I think is still relatively I don't want to go so far as to say radical, but like unusual. And you know, she was just like recognizable as a normal teenager in a way that sometimes is hard to find. And yeah, I just love those books. I also really liked Prep, which I don't actually know if that was marketed as YA or adult, but it's so good. Today it would probably be YA. I mean, it's a young main character, but yeah.
What about you, Jaya?
When you said Prep, I actually just read that, I think within the past year. Oh, wow. A friend was shocked that I had not read it before, and they bought it for me, and I loved that book. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Curtis Sittenfeld is incredible.
Yeah. Oh, that was so good. I'm trying to think. I mean, I feel like I also, you mentioned before having like a bad memory. Like I know that I spent a lot of time reading, and sometimes I'll pick up a book and be like, wait a second, have I read this before? Like it completely left my mind. I mean that's yeah. And then the pandemic has like not made it any better, but I'm just like scanning my bookshelves, like what we got here. You know, I think that I also wonder if like YA wasn't I mean, I think it was starting to be defined when we were kids, because like we're about the same age, but there was, I think like when Harry Potter came out, that was the first like YA, the first time I was aware of like YA as a genre, rather than just...
I sort of remember it being like there was the teen section in Barnes and Noble, and that was where I went. But I don't think it was like the same sort of marketing.
But I do remember there was this book called Walk Two Moons that I read. Like I remember reading that all the time. That was like a fixture on my shelves, and I really loved it. Yeah,
I like that.
And that was one that I recently looked up again because I was like, what even happens? But I was so obsessed with it, and then realizing like, wow, this was really dark. Like, but
there was a lot of dark ones that I mean, I read this series that no one seems to believe me when I tell them about it. I think it was called like Fearless or something, and it was like about a girl born without the fear gene, and she was like constantly beating guys up, and had like an evil stepfather. I don't know. It was wild. I recommend looking into it. But yeah, there's it's an emotion. You read a lot of dark stuff at that age, I think.
Absolutely.
Pilot definitely knows Fearless, so all right. Laura asked, did this book inspire you, either of you, to stop trying / not do what you're supposed to do in life, in your own lives?
No. Not as much as I hoped. I mean, I think maybe I've been slightly more forgiving of myself in terms of not having come up with the next book idea yet than I would have been before, maybe. I don't know how much of that is the book versus the pandemic or whatever, but like after I am finished with the book, I'm pretty antsy. And like I said, I'm very project oriented, where I like need to have the next thing set up so that I know I have something that I'm working on, and I still don't. And that's sort of disorienting for me. But I think that I've tried to inhabit Mary a little bit here and accept that like I can't force it, and then it should be something that I enjoy and like to do, and so it'll happen eventually. But it's definitely mixed results.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to what Katie was saying before, like all of these themes about like not putting the world on your shoulders, not acting for what you think everybody else wants out of you has been like the main theme of therapy in the past year. And so I really think this book was very like crystallizing for me of a lot of things that I had already been kicking around in my head, and really like solidified a lot of those ideas. So again, similarly, have not like immediately said fuck it and stop trying at everything. But it definitely helps me recognize like, hey, maybe you don't have to do that here.
Right. Yeah.
All right. The next and last question is from Marissa, who asked, what is the number one thing you hope teen readers take away from the year I stopped trying?
Yeah, I mean, I would say to give themselves a little bit of permission to not feel like they have to do everything right. Or, you know, I think that some teenagers have that figured out already. I did not, and I think there are a considerable number who do not. And, you know, a lot of the things that I thought mattered so much at that age really don't. And there's only so much you can really convince a kid of that. Like, I think it matters the world to you at the time, and so that's all it is. That's all you can see, and that's understandable. But like, I think that if a kid read the book and felt like they could be a little bit more patient with themselves in terms of figuring themselves out and giving themselves room to make mistakes, that would be kind of the best case scenario for me, I think. Great.
Well, that is all the questions we have. So to wrap up, do the two of you have any upcoming projects, anything you want to promote, like the Rolling Library maybe, and any social media that you want people to follow you on?
Yes, go follow the Rolling Library everywhere. That is, and because we got events going on all the time, or if you, you know, if you're planning an event that you think the Rolling Library could be at, please follow us everywhere.
And it's just at the Rolling Library, right?
I believe so, yes. Let me double check that right
What
now.
is it on Instagram? Yeah, I think for me, nothing beyond what you already said. I hardly ever tweet, so that's probably not even worth it anymore. But my Instagram is just my name, and yeah, just I hope that you'll read this book and enjoy it.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for joining us. As one more reminder, you can purchase Katie's book right down there in the link below. Katie is popping in to sign it really soon, so be sure to put in your order. In the instructions, you could also put in, like, if you want Katie to say to whoever your name is, you can do that there. Any upcoming events that the shop has can be found at our events website. We're kind of slowing down because the holiday season is right around the corner, but on Friday, November 26th, we do have Saturday, November 27th. I don't know the days of the week apparently anymore. Really. Shop Small Astoria is happening. 10% of our profits that day for Shop Small Astoria will be going to the Astoria Food Pantry, which is kind of friends with the Rolling Library, you know, so that is great. And then on Tuesday, November 30th, we have an event with Darcy Little Badger and Aiden Thomas for another YA book called A Snake Falls to Earth. So if you want to join us then at 6 p.m. And then our final event of the whole 2021 year is Atlas of the Heart with Dr. Brene Brown, which is December 2nd, and that one is ticketed. So buy your book now. One more time, that link right down there at the bottom. In the instructions field, you can also put donate a copy to the Rolling Library, and it will be donated. There are more instructions on that link I posted above. And that's all. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you.